I wrote our introit 11 years ago here in Concord in my office. At the time, I was looking for music and lyrics that expressed my sense that humility is central to how we approach our religious life and really life in general. Humility because we recognize our interdependence. Humility because of all the gifts that we have received that make life possible and worthwhile, the experience of grace. Humility because we don't know all the answers, because our perspectives are limited, and because we are just one small, tiny speck in the larger universe of matter and consciousness. And the lyrics speak to the centrality of storytelling and listening in our theology and our way of being with each other. And the song concludes with an appeal to a sense of hospitality, another core value of our religious community. I couldn't find a song that expressed exactly what I was looking for, so I started composing my own, and here is what I wrote. Humbly we gather in worship together. Humbly we walk in the spirit of love. We join our voices, we listen, we share. Welcome the stranger. Let us welcome all here.
Please repeat after me. It is a blessing to be. It is a blessing to be here. It is a blessing to be here now. It is a blessing to be here now together.
At our auction last June, then 8-year-old Hewie Pollard Messenger kept raising his paddle as congregants bid on the opportunity to determine a sermon topic for the coming year. When he won, I couldn't wait to hear what he had in mind. The theology of Pokemon cards, perhaps? Oh, no, wasn't that. The intricacy of being the youngest in a large blended family? Nope. Turns out he wants us to wrestle with the reality of coming face to face with people experiencing homelessness. I was blown away by a sensitivity to one of the core agonies of our times. A few weeks ago, we sat down to explore our topic. He shared how there is this feeling within him when he's in the car, driving by a person holding up a sign asking for support, a person who doesn't seem to have a home like he does, a bed, electricity, a shelf for books, all those things he, Hewie, has had all his life. Even when he goes camping with his family, he has all he needs, and he is aware they get to stay at a campground that is safe and protected with their car nearby as needed. Hewie shared how he is impressed by how people manage sleeping outside without showers, without a mailbox, without a laundry machine. And then the conversation turned to the question, what can we do? How can we be helpful? Because both of us agreed we want to be helpful, we want to be useful. He suggested the option to raise money. Right, clearly an important consideration when it comes to addressing homelessness. Hewie gets an allowance, and part of his allowance is designated as giving money. Sometimes he uses that money and gives it to people they pass on the road. He would like to give them food if they're hungry, especially if they live nearby. Perhaps they could sit on the porch and rest and eat for a bit. He's also clear that a really important gift is to offer kindness, to treat them, the people he's passing by, with kindness, but maybe not too much kindness. And at first I was like, what? Why not? But then because that might make them feel worse. I thought that was a good insight there. Hewie thinks that people experiencing homelessness probably want to be accepted and treated like everyone else, rather than having people treat them differently. I believe he's right on. We talked about the reality that homelessness is real and visible in Concord, but also a national challenge with millions of people feeling insecure about their housing situation, including many families with children. In New Hampshire alone, there are over 3,000 school children each year who experience homelessness at one point or another. Sometimes they couch surf with friends or relatives. Sometimes they live in a car. Sometimes they sleep outside. Their schoolmates don't necessarily know. Even their teachers don't always know. And we discussed Family Promise, the program that offers shelter to families in the Concord area that otherwise would experience homelessness. I explained how we are one of 13 faith communities who host up to 3 families 4 times a year, providing meals, beds, an open ear, and a kind heart. When Family Promise of Greater Concord was first started over a decade ago, There was some debate in our congregation about whether this was the right way to use our resources. Not that congregants didn't want to help people find permanent housing, but perhaps we should focus our efforts elsewhere. What about people who have experienced homelessness for a long time, chronic homelessness? What about the systems that cause housing insecurity to begin with? Great questions that certainly continue to be relevant. And yet, I feel what we have learned is that it is not an either-or. By hosting families in our building, by getting to know the children and their caregivers, by spending time with them, getting proximate with them, as Brian Stevenson would say, the issue of homelessness moves from the head to the heart, and from the heart to the hand. And then it can move back from the hand to the heart and to the head to engage the issues in other spaces and to recognize the systemic nature of this agony of our time. In November of 2013, more than 10 years ago, I led a service titled In Our Backyard, Facing Homelessness. It was followed by an all-church forum focused on the reality that two people had started to set up camp in the woods behind our church. There was a lot of different feelings expressed: apprehension about liability, worry about the safety of all involved, concern about others joining and where that would lead. And there was curiosity about what this could mean for us, and gladness that we were able to offer something meaningful and important. Was this our call to answer at this time? What really changed the conversation was when those two people in the woods became real. When they showed up in person, suddenly had names, Andrew and Charlie, and had stories that touched our hearts, had stories that could teach us about our lives and about their lives, about living with nature, about Native American ways of being. And after much listening and sharing over a period of time, we decided that yes, we could answer this call and make it a part of our ministry. Andrew and Charlie eventually moved on, finding permanent homes. A few others have followed in their footsteps over the years. We currently have a written agreement with Kevin about the use of our woods. The youth group has gone to visit him, hear him tell stories and play songs on his guitar. Jim Schlosser, serving on our board, is currently our point of contact and has worked with him to keep his space clean. And it is complicated. Not all aspects of the agreement are always followed exactly. My instinct to be helpful and useful has to be tempered sometimes. Just because I think I know what I would do if I were in his situation doesn't mean it is what would work for him. For 9 years, I served on the board of the Concord Coalition on Homelessness, with Alan Groh as executive director, 3 years as chair of the board. It was deeply meaningful work. Yet there were moments when I felt reminded of the emotional roller coaster I rode during my 4 years in Chicago just before coming here to New Hampshire. Am I doing the right thing, or am I just perpetuating the status quo in some form, or perhaps even being used to make a bad situation worse? Here's my story. Most of the time, when the doorbell rang in our apartment on the 3rd floor of Ryder House, the seminary housing I shared with Kara and my kids, Daniel and Noah, I hesitated, I stopped and paused, I got anxious, and I debated whether to pretend I was not even home. I got anxious because I knew that most of the time it wasn't one of my seminary friends. They all had keys to the main door of Ryder House, and those who visited me regularly knew that when I was home, the door to our apartment was usually unlocked. When they knocked, I simply called for them to come in. I liked it that way. I liked the idea of my door being open and people feeling comfortable stepping into my life. Yet I got anxious when the doorbell rang. I was reluctant to answer the door because most of the time it meant I got asked to step out of my comfortable world of food in the refrigerator, a roof over my head, a bed to sleep in, and plenty of books to read and for leisure or school. I was reluctant to answer the door because most of the time William or Curtis asked me to come down for a quick moment. I liked William and I liked Curtis. They did not know each other well, but I first met both of them the day I arrived in Chicago in 2006. It was a hot and humid August day, and I had driven a moving van from Minneapolis to Hyde Park. The moving help I had hired online did not materialize, and I began to unload on my own all 26 feet of tightly packed boxes and furniture into our apartment on the first floor of Honeywell, one of Meadwell's residential buildings. The rest of my family was vacationing on the beach in Florida. I don't know what would have happened if Curtis and William hadn't shown up, but suddenly they were there offering their services, and I gladly accepted their help. And by the end of the day, I paid them for their hard work with the cash I had set aside for the missing online movers, and they promised to be back the next day to finish the job. Both Curtis and William were homeless at the time, but they returned, and with their continued help, we emptied the truck just before a downpour of rain provided relief from the heat of the day. I felt good about the money I was able to offer both. They had earned it. They felt good about the money they received. They had earned it. Over the years, both Curtis and William were paid for odd jobs around the Meadville campus, picking up trash, cutting the grass, and they helped our family move from Honeywell to Ryder, the building next door. Yet much of the time I had no work for them to do. Much of the time I didn't know how to respond when they asked. Mike, yes, they both called me Mike, you got some work for me? I'll do anything you want. Just give me a chance to earn a little something. I'm hungry. For a while I was clear in my mind and with them. No work, no money. If you're hungry, I will go get you something to eat. I'll give you something to eat, always. And a can of soda if I have one. If you need to go somewhere, I'll see if I can drive you to where you need to go. If you need to make a call, I'll let you use my phone. If you want to talk, let's talk. That's how it started. They were both incredible storytellers. Professional storytellers, really, since through their stories they make their living, or rather ensure their survival. Kind of like preachers, only better at the ask. Their stories are compelling and frustrating. Frustrating because I'm never quite sure which parts are true and which parts are custom designed to, manipulate my feelings and the hand guarding my wallet. As I said, kind of like preachers. Yet the truth does not always depend on words. Not when I run into William at midnight in early January. As I'm walking home from the bus station, he is freezing, I can see that. He's deadly tired, I can see that. And he's frustrated by the police chasing him from place to place, ready to arrest him for huddling up on the Midway or under the Metro Line bridge. I listen, and I can feel he appreciates how I take him seriously. We walk to our apartment so he can warm up. I give him my old winter coat, and the $20 I leave with him will allow him to spend the next 7 nights in sight. The apartment buildings on the other side of the Midway, owned by the university but unoccupied. He can't leave anything inside during the day, but he can sleep there and shower for $20 a week. Or is it $20 for 2 weeks? The story changes throughout the years, but that night, it doesn't matter. That night, and on similar occasions, I have clarity about what to do, and I do it. Just like the evening when Curtis stands outside our door. It is winter, and he is coughing badly. You know, the deep, raspy kind you cannot really fake. He's no longer homeless at that time. He had been diagnosed with AIDS, and the government was paying for a 1-bedroom apartment on 63rd Street, just a few blocks from my own apartment. Someone had told him that he needed a particular medication to cure his cough, and he was asking for money to pay for it. Kara, my wife then, didn't usually get involved in my relationship with Curtis or with William. Yet that night, I went upstairs and asked her, the nurse, to please come down and listen to that cough. Without hesitation, she tells him that he needs to see a doctor, and right away. Curtis is reluctant because he knows the hospital on 47th Street will make him wait through most of the night before a physician will see him. The hospital is on the other side of MLK Boulevard, so I drive him, go inside with him, and later get him some food so he doesn't lose his spot in the line. I'm happy when he calls me the next day to let me know that he's getting the care he needs. He was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. They will keep him in isolation until he's better. For the next week, he calls most days with a brief update. It clearly makes a difference to him that someone knows he's in the hospital, that someone cares. I do care. And the point of telling these stories is to remind me why I felt so torn when that doorbell rang in our apartment. I care because Curtis and William had become something very different from 2 guys hustling on the street. We had crossed into each other's boundaries. We had been there with each other at critical moments in our lives. I wanted to think of them as friends, even when I knew that would be a misnomer. I didn't know what they thought of me, really thought of me. They knew I am a minister, but I was not their minister. Or was I? We had no covenant with each other, none we ever talked about, and yet there was an unspoken trust between us, a code of conduct that had evolved. It was limited, but it was there. This unspoken covenant was more powerful than the many promises that had been made about plans for the future, about ways to make a change, about money to be used or returned a certain way, about showing up for appointments, rides, or work. Those promises had been made in abundance, and there was little to show for it. Where was he the day we had agreed to pick up his high school transcript? He needed the transcript to get back his government ID so he could get his food stamps. And I got annoyed when it happened again, and I had to explain to my kids why I rushed them home from school again. Months later, he shows me the transcript and his government ID, but then he misses his appointment to claim back payments on his Lynx card and is cut off from the $200 the card provides each month towards food purchases. If I were to have thought of myself as their minister, I recognize that I was involved in a shared ministry with a number of other people, both Curtis and William had cultivated over the years. Some of my Meadville colleagues were a part of that network, but for the most part, the network was anonymous and unaware of itself. We are all a part of a system of dependencies, of nebulous and overt power dynamics, of desires to help and to be helped. Yes, I found the life I got to observe through the connection to Curtis and William intriguing. I didn't have to travel around the globe to see and hear about a totally foreign culture. I was moved by their stories of domestic and institutional abuse, the violence they experienced, and the violence they had perpetuated at times. Yet my relationship with them had to be about more than cultural tourism. It had to be related to their amazing ability to reflect on life, to preach about a future they may never see, to have faith that this time the outcome may be different, that this time they have a chance. So perhaps I was afraid to answer the door because I too continued to be hopeful. I continue to be hopeful that it will not be necessary for either of them to hit rock bottom again. I continue to be hopeful that what I had to offer would make a real difference. But I am used to success. I'm used to getting a goal, setting a goal, and achieving that goal. Answering my door was frustrating because most of the time I was reminded that no goal was accomplished, that success was a dream, that conditions hadn't improved. I was reminded that I didn't have any good answers. I was reminded that I was not even sure there were answers, at least not the kind we would have liked to see. I was so hopeful the last winter I spent at Meadville when Curtis came to me to share that he was leaving Chicago. He had been placed in a group home in Indianapolis to receive counseling and treatment along with 25 other AIDS patients. The day before his departure, he stopped by, we chatted, took pictures, even hugged, and I gave him a few bills he did not expect to receive. The same week, William also rang the doorbell to say goodbye. A friend had told him about a job in Minneapolis, and he was confident in the quality of the Minnesota welfare system to offer him a successful start. He got a haircut, I laundered his clothes, and we too had an emotional goodbye. How cool, I thought. How cool for me to experience that. Yes, indeed, my street congregation had found a way to be transformed, and the doorbell would remain silent for the rest of my life in Chicago. 3 weeks later, both had returned. William didn't get the job he had hoped for, perhaps never tried, and used the money I had given him to help him get settled to purchase a return ticket to Chicago. Curtis spent 2 good weeks in Indianapolis until a glitch in the paperwork forced the program to bus him and half of his group back to Chicago. He had given up his apartments to enter the program. Now he was homeless again and depressed. Answering my door made me anxious because I wanted to know what is best to do, or at least I wanted to have an idea of what is good to do. And yet so often I didn't know either. I share Hewie's feeling inside when I pass someone with a sign asking for resources. I want to be helpful. I want to be useful. And yet 15 years later, I still lack clarity sometimes about what to do when the doorbell rings or a person I don't yet know walks into my office asking for money or other support. But thanks to Curtis and William and Andrew and Charlie and Kevin and so many others, I keep being reminded that ministry is not just about answering calls from a distance, a safe distance. Ministry is about answering the door when the doorbell rings, even if it makes us anxious, hesitant, reluctant, and ready to pretend we are not home. Even if we know we don't have all the answers and we're unsure we're doing any good. Ministry is about answering the door because we have a home, many of us, most of us have a home when others do not. Ministry, mine and yours, is about putting ourselves in the position to be useful and holding on to a sense of pre-admiration rather than prejudice, even when we fear we may be used or our support may be abused. We may not be able to cast aside all doubts and fears, as the choir sang, yet let us tear down the walls that hold us back. May we let love break down the walls so we can join our hearts as one. There's so much work to do, many doorbells to answer, with humility, a listening heart, and the aspiration to welcome the stranger until the stranger is a stranger no more. May it be so. Amen and